right. Well, thank you so much for being here in our first post keynote session. And we have Gary and Huizu here to talk to us about taking project-based learning online. Gary's from Teachers College at Columbia University, where I also have a role, and it's a very long and storied background in the field. And then Huizu is from NYU. So we have two very experienced, great presenters, and I'm going to turn the floor over to them. And it's great to have both of you here.
Okay, well, thanks, David, and welcome everyone. And we're doing this as a meeting format rather than the webinar format. So if you happen to have your mic on, you might want to turn it off until we get to an opportunity for discussion and interaction. I just want to remind everyone that the full paper for this presentation is part of the download deck that the conference made available. So if you want to get some more detail than we'll have time covering today, it should all be in that paper. And we want to start by just telling you a little bit about our plan for this session. We are, basically we've got four topics that we're going to cover. We want to talk about this course that we were teaching on campus and moved it online, and talk about the challenge that presented to us last fall in the middle of the pandemic. Then we want to talk a little bit about how we responded, what the design was for the course as we moved it online, best laid plans. They look great and they look particularly good in August. And they look pretty good in September, and we'll explain the story as it goes through the semester. And we'll talk about the reality of that. What did we learn? How did it work? What happened? And then we'll have some time for discussion, and we're hoping that there'll be enough time for discussion to do that in some small a brief breakout session with breakout rooms that'll then let you come back and tee up the best questions for discussion. So that's our plan. And start us off, Hisu's got some poll questions that he thought might tell us a little bit about who's here.
So when Gary and I were planning this session, we thought about, how do we incorporate some of the practices that we use in our own course? And so, obviously getting to know the students and getting to know each of you a little bit is really useful in thinking about the construction of learning opportunities. So just to get us started, if everyone could respond to this first question: what continent are you joining us from? Okay, everyone's responded already, so I'm going to end the poll, share the results, and it looks like we've got one from Africa, a couple from Europe, North America dominating the audience, and then two from South America. And I think I may know one of the people from South America. I'm going to stop sharing this, and we're going to go to our second poll question, which is, what is your role in the learning sector? So if people could take about 10 seconds, how would you describe your role? I understand you may have multiple roles, but just one. What's your role in the learning sector? And I'm going to launch that poll. 4 more people to respond. Pretty balanced group. We have some developers, folks who are in corporate ed, K-12. We got one person representing K-12, post-secondary research. Okay. Great. Just in the interest of time, I'm gonna end this poll. I'm gonna share the results. So here's who looks like is in the room with us today in terms of your role in the learning sector. I'm gonna stop sharing this one, launch the third poll question, which is, how many online courses have you taught or taken? Almost all the results are in. 73% of you have responded. So I always wonder what this number would have looked like a year ago, pre-pandemic. But not surprisingly, the majority of folks who are here today have taught 10 or more online courses. I'm going to share the results so you can see more detailed view. So everyone here has had some experience teaching online, but the majority, 10 or more courses, think about that. You know, that's a lot of courses. So our last poll question, just to get a sense of the room, launch this, and this has to do more with learning technologies or tools. Which of the following have you used? So 14 out of 4, wow, 15. Let me give another 10 seconds just for people to respond. 16 out of 19 have voted. All right, I'm going to end the poll and I'll show the results. But not surprisingly, 100% of respondents have used Zoom. 5 of you have used Slack, which is one of the tools we've used. LearnDash. I'm not going to ruin what LearnDash is. Carrie, you want to say a little bit about what LearnDash is?
So LearnDash is actually the learning management system that we used for our course. So we'll tell you a little bit about our LearnDash experience as we go.
And Asana. 3 of you have used Asana in your work. So I'm going to stop sharing this. I'm going to turn it back over to Gary now.
Okay, so I failed once again to achieve my goal of having someone from Antarctica in the audience, but it's good that we have a good distribution anyway. We're going to start by telling you a little bit about the situation that we were in, and it's going to be particularly interesting to us to have so many quite experienced folks who've taught multiple courses online. I'm trying to think back to how many courses I've taught online. I'm not sure it's 10, and maybe it's 7 or 8. And that sort of begins kind of the storyline for how we got to the fall semester. Hisu and I had been working on online learning probably for 15 or 20 years in one capacity. We both had roles supporting online learning, helping faculty move online. We both taught online, and I would say for 6 or 7 years prior to fall of 20, we had shied away from teaching online and had sort of drifted back to teaching mostly on campus just because of all the advantages that come with teaching on campus. And so all of a sudden we were plunged back into figuring out how to take a course that we had been teaching on campus for a number of years and had iterated multiple times and kind of gotten it to the point where we really like it, and move it online. Now, oddly enough, the course is a course on networked and online learning. So you might ask, why did you start by teaching that course on campus? And I would say the reason largely is because most of our demand was for on-campus courses, and also that the course itself doesn't really focus on courses as a good venue or a good container for online learning. It's much broader than that. And in fact, we think to some extent courses are kind of a handicap as you think about online learning. But nonetheless, we didn't have a choice, so we were pushed into a situation of having to figure out how to do this. This was a graduate course at Teachers College in the Department of Human Development, largely attended by students in the Learning Analytics program, but also students in some of the technology programs and some of the other programs of the college. We knew we were going to have somewhere between 15 and 25 students, the way the course typically maps out. And, in the past we had, and they were mostly master's students, but also a sprinkling of doctoral students. And we knew that the students were going to be widely distributed. I think someone's got their mic on, but I appreciate the.
Harry, you're muted.
Oh, got it. Okay. So, when we look at the challenge, the real issue that we had was that we had done a whole set of practices that we had evolved over a period of time, focused on project-based learning. And we were trying to figure out, how do we take a project-based learning course and move it online? And so we had to rethink what it meant to do a project, how projects would be done, how students would be organized in projects. And we really wanted the projects to drive the class rather than instructor presentations to drive the class. The other challenge we had was all of the projects that we used to organize the class were team projects. And we organized students in teams of 4 and 5, and that seems to be a good number for projects that work pretty well. And we had to figure out, how were we going to do that with teams of students who were no longer in the same physical location. And in our case, they also weren't in the same time zone. So as the class evolved, we had a group of students in the Northeast. We had some students in South America. We had students on the West Coast of the US, and we had a substantial number of students in Asia. And so the time zone issue became a real challenge for us, because we needed to get students working together at the same time. And then we also had to figure out, what do we do about course design that would facilitate that. We also had, to make it even more challenging, we also had moved toward teaching our teams on their projects to use agile methods. So in particular, when they were on campus, they were using Scrum methods, the Scrum framework for their projects. And we had to figure out, how were we going to teach that, and how were we going to teach that online? So if you've excuse me, if you've read the Scrum literature, one of the things everyone points to as a challenge is it's hard enough to do it when you're together in the office every day, but it's really difficult when people are widely spread. So we had to figure out, how are we going to do that? And then finally, we're a graduate school, and one of our goals is to prepare people for the professional work that they're going to do. And excuse me. And part of that is not putting them in a student environment, but putting them in a professional environment in the work that they were doing. So we had all of those issues, and they were all swirling around us. And what we started with as our approach is, well, fall semester is coming, but good luck, guys. The college has Zoom, so just do your thing. And sort of the assumption was, just, you got your class once a week, stand up and do your thing and send the students on their way, and they'll come back the next week, and they will have done whatever it is you expected them to do. So as you think about it, and particularly since we have so many experienced online instructors in the group today, that's probably not going to work. And we knew it wasn't going to work, because we knew how hard it was to do team-based learning on projects using agile methods in a professional environment. We knew how hard that was to do on campus. So we had to figure out some strategy that was going to allow us to actually do that online with students who were really far flung. Oh, and to top it off, we had another challenge. And that challenge was, for 3/4 of the students in our fall class, this was their first semester in graduate school. So it was their first semester at Teachers College. It was their first semester at Columbia University. It was their first semester at graduate school. And most of them were home with their mom and dad or their kids. And it didn't feel to them like they were in graduate school. We wanted them to have a graduate school-like experience. We wanted them to appreciate the environment. We wanted them to do all the things that you normally do when you come to campus, but we couldn't come to campus. So we gave it a lot of thought. And as I said, our plan was really well developed by August, largely because we were stuck at home with not much else to do. Or at least I was stuck at home. Hisu was always busy. I was stuck at home with not much else to do but work on the class. And so we came up with a set of design features that gave us a kind of orientation to the semester. So I want to talk now about, what those features were, how we decided to incorporate them, and what we learned. And the first thing we did was that we did say, okay, we will use Zoom. Now, we're all here, we're loving Zoom, it's making this conference possible. But I think from an online learning perspective, it feels like Zoom tends to make us lazy. It lets us default back to the kind of show and tell learning that we did on campus. And it doesn't allow us to take advantage of a lot of new opportunities that online learning might provide. And in fact, the whole point of a big portion of our course on networked and online learning is please take advantage of some new affordances. So we started with Zoom, but we decided that we would limit Zoom in some particular ways. So you see there, we decided we would have a very limited number of Zoom sessions for the whole class. We'd have an initial session, we'd have a session to kick off each project, and then we'd have a kind of wrap-up session. But we would not have a weekly Zoom meeting. This made us uncomfortable to start because we knew the expectation was from the college and from the students that, we're in a class, we should have a weekly meeting. What's that going to be like? But we decided we'd try that anyway. We decided we'd build a website for the class rather than use the college learning management system. Like all learning management systems, the one at the college has limitations. It works really well for the registrar. It doesn't work particularly well for anyone who wants to do anything interesting in terms of learning, not for lack of trying. And Hisu and I both over the years were part of the group that supported learning management systems. So we know it from both sides, and we decided we try not to use it. So we built a website that was going to house the course. We used a LearnDash module, which is a WordPress add-on. And that provided just some basic affordances. So if you haven't used LearnDash, it was something that I was able to set up myself with almost no technical background and experience in it, and did it over the summer. And it worked reasonably well, but we didn't put big demands on it. And basically that was used to hold content. So that was used to hold readings and resources and to organize things. So a little bit probably like the conferences using WOVA as a kind of point of departure, stop off point. Then we decided that we would use two other applications that we thought had a more professional feel to them and also had some advantages. We decided we would incorporate Slack. So we set up a Slack instance for the class and Slack channels for a variety of different things, including each of the teams. And the goal there, or at least our intention there, was to have continuous communication with the students and for them to be engaging in dialogue with each other and with those of us on the instructional side about how their project work was going. And for us, it was really a way to enhance our visibility of what the students were up to. Because we were trying to get them to use agile methods, we used Asana, which is an agile project management tool. I can't remember whether anyone on the poll has used it, but I think one or two people had used it. And that was just a way to give them a little more structure to track their projects. We stuck with our notion that there were going to be group projects, and we use 4- and 5-person teams for those projects. And we did a couple things differently because we moved online than we would have done on campus. When we offer the project-based learning on campus and we create teams, we try to create teams that are pretty diverse in terms of background, experience, And we changed the teams. So as we go through the semester, we change the teams for each of the projects. The class has 4 projects that they're engaged in. They're all design projects. This time we decided that we would form the teams, with a lot of attention paid to time zone. So as it turned out, we ended up with teams that were all folks in Asia and teams that were all folks in North America. And that's probably something we would never have done on campus, but we did it this way to try to facilitate their time together so they'd all be hopefully awake at the same time. And then the other, the other thing we did for moving it online was we kept the team stable. Hisu and I had a big debate about this. Hisu, you may want to weigh in on this. It's like, I was committed to keeping the team stable because I thought it would take a lot longer for them to get comfortable and to know each other. And Hisu thought we should be much more adventurous. So you want to say a little bit about what you saw as the design principle there, Hisu, for keeping them, making them different as opposed to similar each time?
Well, I think, there are pros and cons of each approach. We thought, I thought there may be some value in students getting to work with other students. We all know from group work, some of the challenges associated with that. Maybe you're in a group and there are, personality conflicts. But I think at the end of the day, the call to keep all the students together was the right one. Because what we noticed was, when students did have problems, it forced them to work through it. And Gary's going to talk a little bit about one of the ways that we scaffolded the learning experience on the group projects. I mean, even though there were only 6 scheduled Zoom times for meeting, in reality, we met with the students, I mean, more than I could have ever imagined. I mean, we were meeting with groups 1 or 2 times a week to help them on each of their projects. So Gary, did you want to say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so this turned out to be one of the features that we designed in from the beginning, and it grew over the semester. So there's some things that we started at the beginning, we did less of. But the groups we excuse me, I'm struggling with my allergies this time of year. The groups that we initiated, we also gave them the ability to create their own Zoom sessions. And more importantly than that, to decide when to invite us to join their sessions. So this we found to be a far more effective use of Zoom than for the whole class meeting. So the typical group would schedule a Zoom session once a week or twice a week so that they keep their project moving. And then again, once a week typically, but sometimes more often, they would invite one of us to come to the Zoom session. And that was because we set up the assessment process so that we told them that we weren't there to assess them, we were there to be their consultants. And I should say a little bit about assessment because that was kind of key to a lot of this. We said the assessment process was for the entire group to be successful. They were responsible for making each other successful. And if they saw someone who was going off track, we were counting on them to pull them back or to tell us to pull them back. And that actually worked reasonably well. Few people went off track. Most people got pulled back in. Few projects went off track. And mostly they consulted with us to sort of get everything going again. So we had these group initiated sessions, turned out to be a really useful process. And then we had individual reflections in addition to the group deliverables. And in the individual reflections for each project, students were asked to think about their project, think about their work on it, tell us about the group process, how the project was working, tell us about what they thought about the team's accomplishment, and then what they thought about what they had learned. So if we take these design features and then go look at what happened to them, how would we rate them at the end of the semester? which is on the next slide. Here's where we think we came out. Zoom and Slack, we thought were useful contributions, but they weren't key to success. They were helpful. We thought Asana, as it turned out, didn't work for us. We're still trying to figure out why Asana didn't work. We think it has to do with needing a lot more preparation in Scrum methodology. The group projects worked well. The group initiation sessions worked well. The individual reflections turned out to be a key way for us to get visibility into how the students were feeling and how the class was going. Students got better at reflecting. Turns out people aren't born knowing how to reflect. So we had to scaffold that a little bit more as we went through the process. We had to reinforce some of the group dynamics by reinforcing the Scrum roles and doing some special sessions for what does it mean to be the Scrum Master? What does it mean to be the project owner? But eventually people kind of picked up on that. And one of the things that came from having these tools and having them distributed in the way that they were distributed is that we had really good visibility into how students were progressing, what they were struggling with. We had a good sense of, because the students were using some of these open tools, we had a good sense of how often they were getting together, what their progress was like. Halfway through the semester, we changed our process a little bit and we started combining groups. And I think this is something that we learned worked really well. And I think it actually, I think it was probably a suggestion from the students. And that was that we would take groups and we'd match up two groups and schedule a session where they'd each practice their project presentations with each other and get feedback. So that kind of got back to Sue's idea that students ought to get to meet more people than just the people in their group as they went through the semester. And it also contributed to a much more realistic kind of feedback and assessment process. But one of the things that we got from using these various tools was much greater visibility. So for example, we could follow a group's progress in the Slack, which was really a continuous conversation. And some of the times they were pulling us into the conversation and some of the times we were just watching the conversation. But we had a kind of real-time look at how is that week going? How's team 4 doing on project 2? And what does that look like? And that then enabled us to jump in, and if they were going off track or they were behind, to then coach them a little bit to say, look, you're not going to be able to pull this project together. You're going to have to do some other things. Now, I have to say, giving everyone greater visibility to everyone's work, which again was part of our whole process of design and assessment, also had some downsides because students had greater visibility to each other than some of them understood and knew. So one of the things we learned is that students used a variety of social media in addition to the applications we had teed up for them. You can see it here in the Slack utilization. So if we look at the Slack utilization throughout the semester, on the chart on the left, you've got just a cumulative number of messages that were going on in Slack for the entire class. And, as we go through the whole semester, turns out that, there are, almost 2,000 messages that were exchanged from the beginning of the class to the end of the class. It's a pretty consistent upward trend. So the messaging overall for the class was pretty straightforward and pretty consistent from project to project. If we look at the table on the right, where we've broken down the messages by team, you see a big difference in team utilization of Slack. And that's because I didn't listen to Sue's advice at the beginning of the class and come on much stronger about how people should use Slack and only Slack for their team communications. And our two teams in Asia decided that they were going to do all of their communications on WeChat. Or at least that's what they told us, because we didn't have visibility into their WeChat site. We did have a TA who had some visibility into that, and we do think it was going on there, but we didn't have the same kind of visibility that we had of the conversations that were going on in Slack. And so you see, team 2 exchanged 22 messages over the entire semester. And that's not because that's the only time they were talking. It's because they were using other applications. And as I mentioned, sometimes those other applications provided too much visibility. So, at one point in the semester, I got a complaint from a student about another member of her team who said, he tells me that he can't come to the meeting because he's sick, but I see on his social media feed that he's got pictures at the club. And he really could have come to our meeting. So we didn't want that kind of visibility for ourselves, but the students had that kind of visibility of each other. And so, we've got to sort of change our way of thinking about Slack and then change our way of thinking about which applications we're going to use in the course and then which ones students might use. We're, over the last couple of years, and I think other people teaching online have probably noticed this as well, students bring a variety of applications to whatever class they come to. And there are pros and minuses as to whether we let them bring those applications and use them, as opposed to whether we restrict them to applications that we tee up. We certainly want to use more than just the course platform and the tools on a course platform, but there are some limitations that we have to think about how we might do that. In terms of Asana, again, I think our challenge here was, how do we teach agile methods at a distance to groups that are going to be distributed and are not going to be in the same office every day, where agile methods are optimal for. And here you see this, just a simple chart of Asana utilization. And this is just the number of tasks that got defined in Asana as part of each of the projects. And you see team 1 gets off to a great start by a fairly well-defined set of tasks. And by the way, we're trying to figure out what these metrics mean. So is it better to have more tasks defined in Asana, or is it less? I mean, obviously it's more complicated than that. So this is just a simplification. But it turns out that team 1 got off to a great start because the Scrum Master for that particular team on the first project had been doing Agile for years in the workplace. So he got the team all excited about Agile. Once he rotated off of that role and into other roles, you can see the utilization of Asana went down, and you see we get down to 0 at the last project. Really didn't use Asana for the last project, and same thing going with team 5. Team 5 did not start off strong. Team 5 went down. We would expect, either consistent or growing utilization of Asana because the projects were getting more complex. The other question that we came away with was on the utilization of Agile as a project methodology was our decision to start them off with a relatively simple project and to make the projects grow over time in complexity. So the first project was relatively simple. We wanted them to go through and practice everything to get comfortable with it. It turns out, I think, in the case that for this particular semester, students felt the project could be done without a lot of project management thinking and without a lot of use of structure and applications. And in fact, they did succeed. But so I think we may have taught the wrong lesson. We didn't really reinforce early on how you could use the Agile project management approach to iterate your project and to grow it and to make it more complex. So that was our Asana experience. We're rethinking that. We're trying to figure out, is there a simpler way to do it? Is Asana is Asana really as useful as we thought it would be? Or are we bumping up into a situation where we've teed up too many tools, and do we need to simplify that? So we'll be really interested in particularly since we've got some really experienced folks here, to get your thoughts on, how this design might be changed, how it can be refined. Are there things that you found particularly useful or less useful, and how do we make sense of that? So Hisu's I'm going to turn it over to Hisu, who's going to tee up some breakout rooms, and he's going to explain how that's going to work.
So for the discussion part, we're going to put everyone into a breakout room, and we're going to ask you to, I'm going to put a link to a shared Google Doc into the chat, and it's going to look like this. And in your breakout room, what we're going to ask you to do is insert the name of whoever's in your breakout room, and then add questions and or ideas that you have about either what we did, recommendations for what we could do better. Start off probably by introducing yourself to one another, but we're going to give you about 15, 20, 12 minutes. We're going to give you about 12 minutes to introduce yourself to one another, generate a list of questions and or ideas. And then what Gary and I are going to do is we're going to be going through the shared Google Doc. And then for the discussion part, we'll select some of the questions or ask people to explain some of the ideas. Okay? So go ahead, Gary.
As you know, we like to do real things for our classes. So this is high stakes because we're going to teach this class again. And if you think we've made some real mistakes, this is your chance to save us from ourselves. So we're looking for great ideas and additional thinking about this class.
So we're going to create, everyone's going to get assigned into a breakout room, just accept. And then in your Google Doc, be sure to put your team members' names and then put your questions and ideas. Okay. And I'll give you a 1-minute warning when we're about to come back. Okay. For the folks who are still in the main room, please accept the invite into the breakout room. Hey, Patricia, how are you? For Rowan, Santi, Hangyang, and Patricia, if you need help moving into your breakout room, let me know. Oh, no problem, Patricia. Keep your eyes on the road. All right, I think we got everybody back. Hopefully folks have had a chance to take a few seconds to take a look at what other groups have come up with. I think a lot of useful feedback. I just wanted to share, I think it was from, let me just put, I think it was from Maddie and Rachel at Breakout Room 2. Their first comment was, so many tools in such a short period of time, and I think that's right. I think we may have over scaffolded some of this instead of investing in maybe one tool, and I think that's just such a great observation. The class is not about learning all these different tools, although I think one of the other points raised by Breakout Room 1 was these are good things these are good tools that might serve students well after they graduate. So thank you for those contributions. Gary, did you want to follow up on any of the points that were made or any of the questions that came up, or if folks want to use the reaction button below, you can raise your hand, but we've got about 10 minutes of discussion left. So
yeah, I just I wanted to respond to one of the comments in room 4 about how do we attach grades to the work, and if students think they're going to get graded on it, they pay attention to it. I think that's absolutely true, and we've been trying to break that in our classes, and it's one of the tools we didn't bring to the table because we wanted students to get beyond grades. We were trying to create a more professional environment in which their overall performance, and more importantly than their overall performance, their team effort was what we wanted them to value and to focus on. And I think it took us most of the semester for students to catch on to that. We told them, because they kept asking, we finally gave them a breakdown of what each component of the course counted. But I think we really resisted that, and we really wanted to try, we said to them, look, we want you all to be successful. We're not sorting, here. We're trying to achieve success, and we're trying to achieve collaborative success. And the individual, the focus on individual grading kind of cuts against that. But I think we're up against exactly what the comment points out. We're up against the fact that students focus on what they think they're going to get graded on. I don't have a solution for breaking that, particularly since the rest of the world is kind of, pushing in that direction, including our course review process at the university. So that's one. The other one I would just like to mention, which I thought was a great idea that came out of Group 1, was, for project management, maybe start by having the students kind of investigate project management tools and be part of selecting what that is. And, they may want to shy away from it and say, we've got plenty of tools, or we're going to bring our own tools. But it is true that students have a lot of knowledge of different tool sets that they use in just their regular life, that they try to bring into the class. And maybe we actually leverage that in a more formal way, say during the first 2 weeks of the term, and kind of have them build a little bit of the experience with us, which I think picks up on that really nice point from the keynote about, engaging the users, the end users, and building the experience that you're trying to have match their interests and needs.
Hey, Trevor, I see you've got your hand up. Did you have a comment about something Gary just mentioned, or another point?
Yes, I actually did. It was about the comment that he was commenting on from our group about making it markable in terms of that, and how you found that students themselves weren't necessarily engaging, or at least only engaging much later on in that idea of for their own professional development. What I found from research and from my actual practice in my own teaching experience is that in order to establish that sense of group and community right off the bat, if you go back to Garrison, Anderson, and Archer's community of inquiry model of learning, that you have to go back to, first of all, having a very, very strong teacher presence initially, which out of your initial framework may not have been as strong. And in that establishing of teacher presence, you do an establishment of setting, the community setting function there, where you're establishing what the practices and the expectations of the class are. And having that initial commitment, and again, because this is a virtual environment, reinforcing a classroom environment that says, this is for your professional development, work towards that. That would then create a larger sense of engagement, not only between the teachers or instructors and the students, but the students with the students themselves, to have that community of inquiry, because most of our learning is also social learning from our peers.
I think that's a great idea, a great suggestion. And I think figuring out, how much teacher presence and when teacher presence is there is something that we're still working out for this online experience. And I think in our case, we diminished the sort of whole group exposure to instruction, and we divided it up at the team level. But I think you're probably right that if we added a little bit more, particularly at the outset, and maybe the first couple of weeks are really just all about this orientation process, particularly because I think I mentioned in the group, So many of our students were first semester graduate students whose last educational experience was senior year of college. And so helping them make that transition, I think probably is going to require, much more of input and presence from us, and then just establishing that as a new set of norms.
Or then perhaps front loading the teacher presence so you can establish that community setting. And as they progress further on with projects, then as instructors, you can gradually back off and then say, all right, we have a group meeting on this day to talk about your project, get your comments together, and then we'll deal with it. And that puts a responsibility on them.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I think you hit it on the head that we were probably too light at the beginning. I think it also gets to this issue of, we didn't induct them enough into thinking about agile methods. And that could be part of that as well, that there just needs to be a bunch of preparatory work before they even get ready to do the work. Just looking through some more comments. So someone, one of the groups called for a little more, discussion of a sort of qualitative assessment of the course. So a couple of things which we didn't mention. So, we did get really good, like I said, really good information on the individual reflections. So we got a lot of feedback on that, and a lot of particularly interesting comments about both on the social dynamics of the class and on what people's learning experiences were like. So people in their reflections, and they got better as the comments got more positive as they went on. The social dynamic response and feedback was better. Students said, this course really gave me a sense of graduate school. The people in my team are people that will be my colleagues from now on, even when we're back on campus. So that was a kind of comment that came through. And then the other thing I should mention that I did not mention is because we had taught this course last on campus, we had the student evaluations from the time we taught it on campus to compare to the student evaluations, course evaluations from the online version. The online version evaluations were actually better than the ones when we taught it on campus. So we took, you can make what you will of student course evaluations, but we actually took heart from that. We thought that at least they weren't reporting a diminished experience from the last class.
So I think we're in the last minute. I think our session ends at 11:30. So if there are there any other thoughts, any other questions for us? Gary mentioned the paper in the beginning, so that's available to be downloaded. I think this deck will also be available. You can also, I think, copy and paste the chat transcript if you want to access any of the resources that were highlighted during the discussion. But okay, Gary.
And sometimes you get your best idea 2 days later. So if you get a great idea 2 days from now, please reach out to us and just let us know. Like I said, we're trying to get ready for the next iteration. So we've already got a good set of ideas. So thank you all for coming and participating.
Thanks so much, Gary and Hisu. Thank you so much. It was a terrific presentation. Really enjoyed it. What we're going to do now, we're going to actually switch streams because the next talk doesn't have the breakout room. So this is an unusual case. So we're going to end this meeting. But if you go to Whova and log on to, if you want to stay in this stream to Christoph's talk, which will be next, it'll be at a different link. So we'll see you all over there on the other link. And thanks once again.